Media for Millennials. Welcome to a very special Q&A segment with Natalie Forrest, Senior Journalist for 10 News Perth. Hi Nat, how are you going tonight? Thank you for coming on.
Hi Steph, hi everyone. Great to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited to be doing this with you, Nat, and I've wanted to do it for a while because what we're talking about tonight is going to benefit a lot of students and adults who are keen to get into journalism as a career. And so I was wondering if we could start first with finding out about how you got into the industry and what are the jobs that you've had from that time at the beginning that have led you to where you are now in your career.
Well, I didn't actually start out doing journalism. I started out, I studied accounting, and about 3/4 of the way through that decided this is perhaps not for me. Quick trip to the Middle East, lived on a kibbutz in Israel, travelled around, and then I thought, want to be a journalist. So I came back and studied, and my very first job was with a television station called GWN in WA. Where I was a journalist there for about 18 months in Albany, so running the bureau down there. Then I moved to Bunbury, where I became a sports presenter and a chief of staff, and I did that for about 5 years. I also worked during that time on weekends for 7 News in Perth as a reporter on the road, just to mix it up a little bit. And then in 2004, I moved to Canberra to be a news presenter and news editor for Prime Television, responsible for doing news updates there, which I worked with you, Steph. And I did that for about 12 years. And then part of the way through that, I also then started doing some weekend work with 7 News at Parliament House as a political reporter. So I did that for 12 months and then got a full-time job with them, and I did that for a couple of years, and then it was time to move back to WA and landed a job with 10 News in Perth. So a bit of everything along the way.
That's incredible. Such a big work history there. So much experience. And I know you said it was that trip to the Middle East that sort of changed your path at the time, but can you tell us a bit more about why you wanted to become a journalist, or what do you like about it? What appealed to you that made you switch paths at that time?
I think the Middle East sort of brought out the storyteller in me. There was so many things happening over there. We had a bomb go off not far from our bus when we were travelling, and I just sort of suddenly, it ignited this passion in me to want to tell stories and to begin reporting on things that mattered. So that was sort of what sort of sparked it. And I mean, it was hard work along the way, a lot of hard work. And I had to learn to love it. Even now, after nearly 25 years in the industry, writing is still really difficult for me. It's not something that's natural, it's something I have to work at every day. But I love it. It's addictive. And having access to information, having access to people, learning the ins and outs of a story, and helping people, helping the vulnerable, helping people who are in a situation that they shouldn't be in, and holding people to account. So they're probably the things that drew me to journalism.
Awesome. And so then for students today, the type of students that I will go and work with in a workshop, how would you recommend that they could get their start in the industry? Because things have obviously changed between, when you first started and when I first started, and now we have a lot of social media in the mix as well in the job and the industry. So what sort of advice could you give to students and adults today who are looking at this as a career path?
It has changed a lot, and when I first started out, there were definite pathways that you followed to get a job. Now it's a little more difficult. The industry is going through a transition phase where I've always worked in television, but TV news is changing. It's evolving. Traditional forms of media are sort of falling away and giving way to the internet. So I think there are plenty of platforms that people can actually start doing their own journalism. The invention of, things like your mobile phones and things anybody can be a citizen journalist. So you've got that ability, you've got those tools, so use them. Obviously, most people, if you're wanting to go into traditional media, you're going to need to do a university degree. But a university degree doesn't necessarily just guarantee you a job. So get out there, start telling stories, watch news as much as you can, absorb as much news as you can, and absorb it from a whole range of different types of media. We have, all sorts of platforms, online, radio, television, print. Just absorb it from wherever you can get it, and look at how it's done in different styles and different forms. That would be my best advice.
And what about work experience? We know it's hard to get sometimes, but is it still important to try and pursue that as well, to have that on the job experience behind you as well as your university degree too?
Yeah, absolutely. COVID has made it incredibly difficult to get into newsrooms because, obviously they're limiting people coming and going. But you can actually do stuff online as well. But absolutely, I would advise work experience. It's about getting out there, being seen, being heard, and doing the job, learning on the job, and, get into as many media organisations as you can. A lot of media groups will take people if it's part of a study. So perhaps look at some sort of institution that offers work placement. That's also a good way to go. And then embed yourself and get out there with the journos and learn off them. And when they do a story, write it yourself and get them to have a look at it and get it subbed by a sub-editor who can help you and show you how to improve your story. So yeah, just roll your sleeves up and get in.
Excellent. And then, so what does a typical day look like for you? And we were talking about this just before we started too, that it's been a very different news year in the last year as well. So what does it look like for you now as a reporter on the job, turning up for work every day?
Yeah, I eat, sleep and breathe news, quite literally. So first thing in the morning, I open my eyes and I'm listening to news. I've got the radio on, I've got the television on, I'm scrolling through news feeds like Twitter, I'm on, looking at websites, looking for news. And that's just a constant process all day, every day, in between making calls, lining up stories, and then at night you're watching your story and then you're watching how the competition has done that story or somebody else has done it, so that you can compare and contrast, and that's how you get better at your craft.
Yeah. Do you have to have a thick skin to be in this industry?
Oh my gosh, do you have to have a thick skin? Rejection along the way, and it's hard, and that's not something that you naturally get comfortable with, but you learn to live with it and you learn how to take it. Particularly with social media, there are trolls online. There's rejection from people that you're trying to interview, people who don't want to talk to you. There's rejection within the industry itself. We've all been for jobs that we think we should have got and we haven't, and they've said, no, we don't like the look of you, we don't like the sound of you, we don't like your writing style, we don't like your hair colour, we don't, there's all sorts of rejection along the way. So you do have to have a thick skin, and you have to keep everything in perspective. If I can give you one piece of advice, it's keep perspective. Rejection, you can either, take it to heart and be hurt by it, or you can use it as a powerful motivator to get better at what you do, or to change tacks, look for a different person to speak to, or somebody else for your story.
Yeah, that's so great that you've said that too, because for these students, I suppose their first taste of rejection in the media will be going for jobs, internships, work experience, and getting those initial knockbacks before they've even maybe decided to actually study it and then go and pursue it as a career. So the fact that you're adding to that and saying, well, actually, even if you are successful and you get in and you start your journey, you're also going to get that rejection on a daily basis, and that's just really honest, isn't it? Absolutely.
And if you can't learn to work with rejection, then you're going to find journalism really difficult. Unfortunately, journalists aren't loved, because quite often what we're trying to do is to highlight something that's gone wrong, something that should have happened that hasn't, or we're trying to highlight these situations that need change, and change is uncomfortable for people, and quite often you'll find that people involved in your story will be hostile, or they won't want to talk to you. You know, we've all been to court where somebody has yelled at us or spat at us, or those kinds of things. That's a part of being a journalist. Unfortunately, not everyone likes us, and you've got to learn to deal with that.
Yeah, definitely. No, this is so good to be talking about this. Another thing that's just come to mind too is being able to take feedback and constructive criticism. I remember when I started, and for anyone really, anytime you enter a new job, every newsroom is different. Everyone's got a different style of writing and presenting, and there's an adjustment period, and it's not unusual to be corrected and told to rewrite things. So is that another trait, like just being able to say, yes, I'm going to take this feedback, I'm going to take this criticism and be better, rather than, oh, they're attacking my work, or I'm not good enough, or what are your thoughts on having
Absolutely. The thing with journalism is it's not like a maths equation. There's no right and there's no wrong. It's not black and white. How we approach a story can depend on who we're working for, who our producer is. I worked at 7, and on a weekend I would have one producer that would like writing one way, and then the next day I'd get a different producer who would like something completely different. So learning to take that criticism and be adaptable will really help you in your job. And it helps you to think outside the square as well, because if you only take one aspect of your work, or can't take criticism on board, you become sort of very train track in how you approach things. And journalism isn't like that. You've got to be able to adapt on the fly.
Definitely. And then that kind of leads into the fact that, if you had someone come in for work experience, or if you're looking through a job application, what sort of traits would you be looking out for in that person to go like, yes, you've got what it takes, that's what I'm looking for? I think that's something students really want to know.
Yeah, I'd love to be able to say it's an X factor. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's about attitude. And I have this saying that you can teach anybody to do anything if they're willing to learn. So the number one thing for me is always the right attitude, somebody who's keen, enthusiastic, eager, and wants to learn. Another trait that we like is somebody who's naturally inquisitive. Mm-hmm. Being good at looking at social media, tapping into and listening to people and seeing what people are talking about is also important. And somebody who can have a healthy skepticism, I guess. Quite often we get bombarded with information, messages, people trying to pull us in a particular direction for a story. So having a healthy skepticism is also really important, I think, as a quality to have.
Yeah, great. And so then you've been in it a long time. If you're looking at it now, I mean, that is a compliment. I love to know, like, you're looking at it now. How do you perceive the industry now as a career option? Like, would you still recommend it as in terms of job opportunities, longevity, stability? How do you look at that now? Like, how would you sort of explain or describe it to someone else in those terms?
It's certainly got different challenges. When I first started, there were definite career paths, and traditional media is changing. The internet has really changed the media landscape, so that makes it a lot more difficult. Having said that, though, there are more platforms now, so there are more ways that you can get your voice out there and get your material out there. Look, I love it. It's the best job in the entire world, and I wouldn't still be doing it, a quarter of a century later, unless I absolutely loved it. So, you know, I'm really lucky that I'm still doing something that I really love. As far as young people going into it, there are, it does have these spin-off careers that you can go into. A lot of people go into journalism and they start in journalism. They realise and they try it out. They love it. It's hard work. It's terrible pay. Certainly in the early days, it's really terrible pay. It's hard work. It's long hours. But it will qualify you for a whole host of other jobs. So spin-off jobs like being a PR person, being a media advisor to, you know, a politician or somebody in the community, a mayor, whatever. So there are all these spin-off careers that you can get out of it. So you might be a journalist and you mightn't necessarily get your job straight up, but there are other jobs that you can go for with the skills as a journalist.
Yes, and that's something I try to showcase as well. And just to be realistic and say, yeah, you might have that degree and, well, it might take a little while to get into journalism, but you could still work in the media. There are other jobs too. Like you said, PR, communication jobs, just maybe doing a social media version of being a reporter, just something else, because sometimes it's really hard to just walk into a newsroom and just start your first job as a journalist. Like that, it's really tough.
Yeah, and you know, it mightn't necessarily happen in the time frame that you want it to happen, but there's no reason you can't start your own blog.
Yes.
You know, you can be that citizen journalist. You can be out there with your mobile phone, taking video, putting your own story up. You know, there's Facebook, there's Instagram, there's Twitter, there's so many social media platforms that you can be a journalist on, regardless of whether you're being paid. And that's because the media landscape is changing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you said that. And that's something I encourage these kids to do as well at their age. Like there's no reason you can't start a podcast, you know, and some of them do. And I know it may not be, you know, a journalistic or newsy type podcast, but just giving them the confidence to put their voices out there and utilize a platform and get comfortable with broadcast. Like that's a nice little taste of broadcast. And then they can decide from there, like if that's something they want to pursue. But yeah, just giving them a taster of what might come next. I guess that's what I'm trying to do for them as well. Yeah.
And journalists nowadays aren't just a television journalist or a radio journalist or a print journalist or an online journalist. You know, if, for example, if you work at the ABC, you have to do all of the above. So you have to be multi-skilled. So don't think that you can go into the industry and just channel one type of media. You need to know them all. So get out there and play with them, have some fun, learn some stuff, read what other people are doing or listen to what other people are doing and use those ideas.
Yeah, for sure. And it's, yes, it just reminds me when I started in radio, we had a lot of people come through and they were quite shocked that they had to write for sport as well as news. And, you know, they were fresh out of uni and it was like, oh, no, I don't do sport. And I was like, but you have to do, like, you have to be able to, like you said, you have to be like an all-rounder. You have to be able to write for everything. Even if you don't love sport, you still have to be able to understand it enough to package up a news story on it, regardless of your personal feelings of just whether or not you're into sports. Like it doesn't matter. You have to have that skill set.
And knowledge is power in our industry. Having a good general knowledge of everything from, you know, politics, arts, history, you know, current affairs, sport, weather, you know, having this broad range of knowledge is going to help you. So having that knowledge, that gives you power and that gives you legitimacy.
Definitely. And so is there any last tips or advice or insight that you would share for these guys watching?
Just do it. Yeah. Look, it's the best in the world, like the best job ever. I love it. If you think you're going to go into it and it's going to be high paid, don't. If you think you're going to go into it and it's going to be glamorous, don't. But if you love telling a story, you love, you know, getting information out there, you know, it's the best job in the world. I love it. I'm addicted.
Yes.
It's addictive.
Oh, it's and that's why I thought of you, Nat. I thought, like, who loves what they do? Who loves what they do every day? And I just thought you'd be such a great journo to speak to share your experiences and insight. And yeah, I'm so grateful for your time tonight. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks, Nat. Okay, thank you.
Right.
Bye.
Thanks, Steph.
Bye.